So we're jumping back here into Jarnail Singh's testimony, discussing his outside business interests while he is undertaking his role as a senior lawyer at the post office and later head of criminal law. So on his CV it says he's done it from 1996 to present, but then he seems to want to massively downplay it and say, well, really after the year 2000 it was a bit cost prohibitive, so I kept on referring clients. But the thing that he describes strangely as akin to the hobby of stamp collecting, he describes in his CV what sounds like a quite extensive conveyancing business. Let's see what he has to say as we rejoin the inquiry.
And was this your full-time job?
Yes.
You didn't have any other jobs?
Well, I had a consultancy type of thing going on, but that's more to do with working with somebody else to gain some other experience. But it wasn't substantive or anything like that. It was a bit like a hobby. It would be like being monitored in a business capacity type of thing.
I'm guessing it was a hobby that was paid, though. I'm guessing, like a part-time job, maybe.
It was a businessman I met, and he wanted me to do some work for him, and he was basically acting as my mentor. And I set up a consultancy in consultation with the Law Society, and it was properly registered under the legislation. The Law Society knew about it, the Post Office knew about it, but it didn't have any impact on any of the work I did for the Post Office at all.
Can we just look at your CV, please? WITN 04750101. You set out your employment history here, if we scroll down. And then if we go over the page, please. December 89 to May 15, so 26 years.
Has he omitted it from his CV? That would be interesting.
At the Post Office in its various guises. And then if we go to the foot of the page, please, it says April 1996 to present. J. Singh Judge Solicitors, Crawley, West Sussex.
Yes.
And then over the page, please, in relation to property law, experience in both commercial and residential property law, including have a detailed, I think that must mean including having a detailed knowledge of the Landlord and Tenant Act 1987, the Housing Act 1996.
Yes.
The Leasehold Reform, Housing and Urban Development Act 1993, Land Registration Act 2002, and the Commonhold and Leasehold Reform Act 2002. Acted on numerous residential conveyances in the local Crawley, Horsham and West Sussex areas, as well as lease and rental agreements for both private and council tenancies. Extensive experience in all property matters up to senior level dealing, including the following buying and selling of residential and commercial properties. I think there's some words missing there. Commercial and residential remortgage applications, transfer of equity, drafting leases, drafting commercial assignments, leases, licenses, auction transactions, and property litigation. Work with a range of clients, including large and small businesses, including acquiring, selling, leasing, or developing property of all types, limited companies and limited liability partnerships, and private individuals with active portfolios. And then
that does sound like quite an intense hobby, to be fair. It's not saying that there's anything wrong with it, but clearly this would surely take a substantial amount of time if you're involved with all that. I guess it is over a long period of time, but it does sound like a lot to be involved with. In addition to a full-time role, maybe attention was divided and split, and maybe that did potentially affect performance at work. Like I say, nothing wrong with it at the outset, but that does seem very intense.
I think a full stop. Freehold commercial property acquisition and funding, including the introduction of commercial lenders where appropriate. We were an accredited Law Society conveyancing quality scheme practice. Our accreditation provides, presumably that means provided, our accreditation provided recognition of our adherence to good practice, management standards and commitment to providing efficient and high quality conveyancing procedures, which also led to our introduction onto the panel for some major high street mortgage lenders. Is that all accurate, that from 1996 onwards you were doing that?
Yes, it is, yes. At that time, the indemnity insurance was taken care of by the Law Society, and it was practical. It worked. Yes, it did.
That is, they always say check your CV for errors, don't they? And that seems to be littered with them. Fair play to him. It's not seemed to stop him.
So you had two jobs?
There wasn't that much work in that sense, but what I did do was I worked very closely with the previous employers, referring work to them. So the firm I left beforehand, and the previous firm when first I started. A lot of the work was done for the local community, more or less. They came to see me, and I referred them on. It wasn't sort of a full-time job as such. It's more or less doing the community service, like putting something back in the community, more than actually commercial.
I'm so sorry, I spoke over you.
Sorry.
It looks like quite a lot of work.
Well, it looks like on paper it's completely different to what the reality was. The reality was that it worked for me. Instead of collecting stamps, I was able to put something back in the community. A lot of the people were grateful for it, for the referral, for the recommendations I made. And the Law Society was happy with it, because it was the Law Society who recommended it. And I said, look, this is what I'm doing. This is my full-time job. The post office obviously doesn't interfere. There's no conflict. But this is what I want to do. And I think they actually recommended very kindly, said, well, look, why don't you set it up as a consultancy? You can do both. And I think as and when the practice certificate were up for renewal...
Sorry, can you just slow down?
Sorry, I can't see. As and when the practice certificate came up for renewal, it was done as a bulk renewal by the post office, and they knew very well what I was doing. But it didn't interfere, because it's like, either collecting stamps or doing something which is useful to the community, it was useful to me, and that was the reason why I did what I had to do.
So there's some things to unpick here. I think he's trying to, with the collecting stamps thing, that confused me initially. But I think he's trying to suggest what he was doing as this kind of side business, which seemed very intense, was akin to somebody collecting stamps, although it certainly seems more involved in that. I think it was quite key there when he turned around and said, well, the reality was different to what's on paper. Because if we take what he's saying at face value, he's saying, I was just referring on this work. Well, there's a big difference between on your CV saying you're doing the work and saying that you're referring it. I don't think he mentioned anywhere in his CV there that he was referring on this work. It sounded very much like his business was doing this work. Like I say, there's no suggestion of impropriety here, but maybe what the inquiry is trying to drive at is, did you take your eye off the ball in your post office role?
It is a summary of that for the entirety of the period that we were looking at, as well as being a senior lawyer in the prosecutions department at the post office. You were also in private practice.
It was, yes, you could say that, but it didn't interfere.
Well, I am saying it, and I'm asking you whether it's true.
It is true, yes. But it was true up to about year 2000, 2001, and I think after that, the indemnity insurance got so much, purely because it went on the free market. Sort of £20, £30 a month, they went up to God knows what it did, and all I did then was restricted to monitoring, I think it is the expression, by this businessman. I did bits and pieces for him, a bit, advised him, drafted letters and things for him, because he was grateful for that.
So that sounds like a bit of a blag then, if you're really saying the description that I'm putting below on this role I've had from 1996 to present, so 2024, but actually it was I was only really doing this between 1996 and 2000. The additional 24 years on there, I mean, that seems like a massive reach. We're not talking a few months difference there. It seems like a massive reach in terms of what was happening, saying, well, I was just being mentored after that. That does seem like a bit of potential bulking up of the CV there. I'm not sure how you see it any other way.
You said that it is true up until 2000. If we look at the foot of the previous page, it says April 96 to present.
Yeah, present, it's true. Presently, as you know, the work I've done, I'm working as a consultant for one of the firms.
Hold on, just stop. If we look at the next page, please. Here you detail what you do since you left the post office. And I'm not going to ask you any questions about what you've done since you left the post office.
Okay.
Because that's March 26 onwards, and then August 2021 onwards.
Yes.
I'm asking you about this period from April 1996 to the present day. You've just told us that, in fact, it was only until until 2000 or 2001 that carried on.
Well, maybe that needs correcting or amending, but certainly it's in existence, but I don't do any work through it, purely because I don't want to do it. But if I wanted to, I could do. It's there. If I want to put it into practice now, that the fact is that I can't use it purely because I'm inundated with a lot of paperwork from the inquiry.
Well, come on, that seems reaching for an excuse as well there, because the inquiry hasn't been going since the year 2000, as you well knows. It started in 2022. So, and this kind of, well, the business is in existence, so in theory I could do it. Well, he seems to be suggesting something to do with the indemnity insurance, which I would presume would be a legal requirement. I'm presuming the Law Society would insist that lawyers have some kind of insurance, and if not, that it would be foolish to do it without it. It seems to be suggesting the cost spiked in 2000, so I wouldn't do it. Presumably it's not economical, not taking on enough work through it to justify the exorbitant increase in cost that he suggests in the year 2000. But saying, well, the business is still in existence, well, that may well be true. No reason to doubt that. But there's a difference between a business being in existence where you could do something and actually doing something and putting it on your CV. If you're not doing anything day to day, that seems like an absolute massive stretch to say that. I mean, if we compare this to a job, for example, it would be a bit like listing a job on your CV and overstating it by 24 years and saying, yeah, well, I could have carried on doing that job. Yeah, but do you do it at the moment? Well, no, I don't actually do it at the moment, but if I wanted to, I could go back to that job. Yeah, that's great, but it sounds like you've left, or that you're not actively doing that job anymore, which would imply there was an end date.
So, this is a full-time job, dealing with the inquiry, the questions and preparing statements and reading the documentation forwarded to me by the inquiry. But it's in existence. Anytime I want to work with it, I can do. It always has been, and I think the law side is quite happy for it to be there. I mean, there's nothing untowards in that. I mean, I don't know what's the point you were trying to make. It didn't interfere with
I'm not
work,
making any point. I'm just letting you speak at the moment.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you tell me what the upshot of it, and I'll explain it to you.
I've asked you, is it correct that for the entirety of the period that we're looking at, as well as being a senior lawyer in the prosecutions department, you were also in private practice? And I think you said yes.
Yes. Yes, I suppose I was. Yes.
And if we scroll up this page, please. You were acting on numerous residential conveyances in that period, correct?
Correct.
You were working with large and small businesses, buying and selling or leasing properties, is that correct?
That's correct as well, yes.
And you say this is the equivalent to having a hobby of collecting stamps?
Yes.
Yes, we'll move on, thank you.
Something's telling me that Jason Beer is not buying what sounds like a very extensive conveyancing business that you're a director and a consultant and a lawyer for is akin to the hobby of collecting some stamps.